The screen went black. Then suddenly, flash. The bright LED walls of the international newsroom lit up in red, white, and green. Reporters stood frozen. Phones buzzed. Live feeds from Lagos, Abuja, and Ouagadougou poured into the control room. Something major had just broken. The anchor, a polished international journalist with perfect poise, adjusted her earpiece and took a deep breath. "We interrupt this broadcast with devastating breaking news." Her voice cracked, just slightly. On the side screen, a photo of Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria's former president, appeared. Below it, the words, "Breaking, Buhari dead at 81. Gasps echoed in the studio. The camera cut suddenly, live to Burkina Faso. And there he was, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, standing tall in full uniform, framed by the glowing lights of the presidential broadcast room in Ouagadougou. But something was off. He wasn't reading a script. He wasn't surrounded by staff. His eyes looked full. And then, with the entire continent watching, he said softly, "Before I speak, I must tell you, history will never forget this moment." The world leaned in. Something deeper was coming. Traoré's voice was calm, but carried weight, like a drumbeat in the silence. "When I was a young soldier, barely known by anyone, I crossed paths with a man who saw more than my uniform. He saw my fire." The camera zoomed in slightly. His hands were folded on the podium, steady, but his jaw tightened. That man was Muhammadu Buhari. The anchor back in the studio blinked. Whispers spread through the control room. Few knew they'd ever met. None expected this. Traoré continued. "It was a security summit in Niamey. I wasn't supposed to speak, but Buhari insisted the youngest voices be heard. He handed me the microphone himself." He paused. He looked me in the eye and said, "Speak with courage. Even if they don't listen today, they'll remember tomorrow." The studio was silent. That day changed my life. His voice began to break, not dramatically, but gently, raw. He didn't just lead Nigeria. He inspired Africa's sons to rise. Then Traoré reached beneath his podium and slowly pulled out a folder. Brown, worn. The world watched. There is something he left behind, a truth he wanted told only after his death. Cameras zoomed in, gasps, whispers, suspense. The folder trembled slightly in Traoré's hands. "This," he said softly, "was given to me in complete secrecy." He opened it carefully, revealing an aged, handwritten letter. The paper was faded, but the words were strong. Real. "I never wanted to read this. I prayed I never would." His voice cracked again. Behind him, a faint photograph of Buhari appeared on the LED screens, laughing beside African leaders, smiling with children, arms raised at an election rally. A man of legacy, now gone. This letter was written by Buhari 1 year ago. He said, "To the one who still dares to dream of a strong Africa, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my silence no longer protects anyone." The studio anchor's hand went to her mouth. Traoré continued. He detailed things he saw, choices he regretted, truths he couldn't say while alive. His fingers gripped the podium tighter. It's not just a tribute, it's a warning, a confession, a call to every African child. He looked into the camera now, directly. "But I ask you, are you ready to hear what President Buhari never said while alive?" The air froze. Captain Traoré lowered the old letter. He glanced away for a moment, gathering himself. Then, with millions still watching live, he continued. "This is not about politics anymore. It's about the truth behind closed doors." The studio lights reflected gently off the creased paper. In this letter, President Buhari described something that kept him awake in his final years. He said, I watched leaders sign away their nation's soul for temporary praise. I kept quiet, but it cost us more than we knew. Reporters looked stunned. The control room cut to live feeds from Abuja, Lagos, Bamako. Watch parties frozen in silence. He wrote about meetings held in Paris, Berlin, Washington, deals he didn't want to sign, and a promise he once made to a boy in Borno State. Traoré's voice dropped. That boy died, and Buhari never forgave himself. The emotion hit like a wave. Some journalists in the studio had tears in their eyes. Even the anchor, trained to remain neutral, bit her lip. That's why I'm speaking now, Traoré whispered. Because if we bury this letter, we bury the truth with him. Then he paused. And Africa will never heal. The screen behind Traoré changed. A black and white photo appeared. A skinny boy, no older than 10, standing in the dirt with one broken sandal, holding a Nigerian flag made from cloth. Traoré took a deep breath. His name was Ysef. A gasp echoed in the studio. That name had once been whispered across the region, then forgotten. Buhari met him during a surprise visit to a refugee camp near Maiduguri years ago. The boy saluted him, like a soldier. Buhari asked him, "What do you want to become?" Traoré looked directly into the camera. The boy said, "I want to fight for my people, like you." Silence. Buhari promised he'd build schools, bring peace, protect Ysef's dreams. But not long after that visit, the boy was killed, caught in crossfire between militants and troops. Traoré's hands trembled slightly. Buhari wrote that Ysef haunted his dreams, that he heard his voice in quiet rooms, that he feared dying without telling the world. He failed him. Traoré's voice shook. That's why this letter matters. It's not about the powerful. It's about a boy with one sandal and a broken dream. A tear rolled down his cheek. And how leaders can forget. Traoré gently folded the letter. He stared at it like it held the weight of a continent. In his final days, Buhari wanted to meet me again, he said. Not to discuss policy, but to ask a question. He looked down. He asked, "Do you think I did enough?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't know what to say, because in that moment, I saw not a president but a man broken by guilt. Traoré turned to the global audience. He confessed to me that in 2019, a powerful international deal was placed before him. It would have brought billions into Nigeria. But the cost was land, villages, farmers, families. Traoré paused. He didn't sign it. Gasps again. Some anchors began to whisper. This detail had never been made public. He told me, for once, I chose people over praise. And he paid for it politically. The LED screen behind him now showed a map, regions that had been under threat, regions saved because of one decision. That was the line he didn't cross, and the line many others would have. Traoré looked into the lens. Now it's time you know the rest. Traoré adjusted his earpiece. The global broadcast was still live. There's something Buhari mentioned in his letter, he said slowly. A place they tried to erase from the records. The screen behind him flickered. Then appeared a quiet village name, Gidden Topa, northern Nigeria. Buhari wrote, "What happened in Gidden Topa still haunts me. I was president, but even I couldn't stop it." The mood shifted. It was supposed to be a simple relocation. Oil work had been approved, but the locals refused to leave their ancestral land. They weren't protesting. They were praying, peacefully. Traoré looked down. Then, on a night in April 2020, bulldozers came, not just machines but men, armed, unidentified. A hush fell over the studio. Buhari tried to intervene, but by the time word reached him, the damage was done, families gone, homes erased. The screen showed real footage, a flattened land, distant weeping voices. He never spoke publicly about it, but in the letter, he wrote, "It was the day I stopped sleeping like a human being." A tear slid down Traoré's cheek, and yet, the world never knew. Now, they did. Traoré inhaled deeply. 2 weeks before Buhari passed, I received a call at 2:14 a.m. I almost didn't answer. I was exhausted from travel. He looked up, eyes distant. It was Buhari. His voice was weak, but his mind was clear. A pin could have dropped in the studio. "Captain," he said, "you're the only one who still speaks with fire. That's why I'm calling. I don't need politics anymore. I need peace." The room grew still. He told me he was sick. We knew that. But what he said next? He said, "There are people who will celebrate when I die, but not because they loved me, because they feared what I would reveal." Reporters blinked in disbelief. He asked me, "If I send you the truth, will you protect it?" Traoré looked directly at the camera. That's the night he sent me the letter. He reached into the folder again and pulled out a small flash drive. But there was more. A file marked, "For the people, after my death." The crowd gasped. The truth wasn't over. It was just beginning. The flash drive clicked softly as Traoré inserted it into the display terminal. The giant LED screen behind him lit up. "What you are about to see," he said carefully, "was recorded by President Buhari himself in his private residence 5 months ago." The video flickered. There he was, Buhari, sitting in a simple white robe, face older, eyes tired, but steady. "If you're watching this," Buhari began, "I'm no longer alive, but I need to say what I couldn't." He paused. The room was dead silent. "I made choices, some good, some I regret with my whole heart. I believed in my country, but I didn't always fight hard enough against those who didn't." Traoré's face tensed. "He named names," he said, "powerful people, but I will not show that here, because this is not revenge. This is redemption." The video cut to a moment where Buhari cried, genuinely. He ended with this line. Traoré said, eyes misting, "If Africa is to heal, it must first be honest, even if it breaks us." The lights dimmed. Millions were now crying. And Traoré, he was just getting started. The studio lights dimmed slightly as Traoré spoke again. Buhari's final letter wasn't only about politics or pain. It spoke about people we never hear of, the forgotten ones, like a woman named Hawa Lawal. A photo appeared. An elderly Nigerian woman, eyes full of pride and sorrow, holding a small bag outside a broken mud house. She lived in Katsina. Her village was marked for clearing in 2021, for a road project supported by foreign investors. Traoré's tone turned sharp, but calm. She refused to leave. "This is the land where I buried my son," she told government officials. The crowd fell silent. They gave her a week, then sent trucks. She sat under a tree and prayed. Alone. His voice cracked just slightly. Buhari heard about her, secretly called off the demolition, ordered them to protect her land. Traoré paused. She never knew he saved her. A few audience members wiped tears. She died months later, peacefully, under that same tree. Then Traoré said something that hit like thunder. Buhari didn't always show his heart, but when no one was watching, he had one. The studio held its breath. So did the world. "One part of Buhari's letter," Traoré continued, "is too emotional for me to read aloud, so I will tell it, the way he told me." He looked straight at the camera, unblinking. It was a stormy night, Abuja rain hitting the windows. Buhari sat alone, no aides, no guards, just a small recorder and his words. He closed his eyes briefly. He said, "Do you know what hurts most? Not the criticism, not the betrayal, but the silence of the poor who once believed in me and stopped speaking my name." The words pierced the air like a blade. He remembered a child handing him a crayon drawing of the Nigerian flag. The child said, "This is for you to make real." Traoré's voice broke for the first time. Buhari cried that night, not like a president, like a man who felt he failed a generation. He looked down. He wasn't perfect, but he tried, in ways none of us ever saw. Behind him, the screen showed rainfall outside Aso Rock, then faded to black. "And that's why tonight," Traoré said, "I will do something I never planned to do." The world leaned in. Traoré stepped back from the podium. He took off his beret, slowly, respectfully, and laid it gently on the table beside the letter. "I was trained never to cry in uniform," he said softly, eyes glassy. "But tonight, I will break that rule." The room froze. He stood still for a long, aching pause, then brought his hand to his forehead and gave a slow, full military salute to Buhari's image on the screen. "Not because I agreed with everything he did," Traoré said, voice raw, "but because I now understand what it means to carry a nation alone." The studio fell silent. Even the control room had no words. The LED walls glowed faintly behind him, casting shadows across his face. "He asked me to carry forward his final message," Traoré continued, "that Africa must not trade truth for comfort, or dignity for dollars." He reached for the final page of the letter but didn't read it. "Not yet," he whispered. "The world's not ready." Then he stared into the camera. "But you must be." The screen cut to black. Viewers wept. But they stayed. They needed to know what came next. The screen flickered again. Behind Traoré, a new video loaded. Buhari, sitting in silence. But something was different. His eyes weren't just tired. They were full of finality. "This," Traoré explained gently, "was recorded 48 hours before his death. It was never aired, not even to his closest aides." Buhari stared into the camera. "To the youth of Africa," he said softly, "I want you to remember something. The greatness of our land was never in gold or oil. It was in the hands of children carrying books through war zones." The words cut through every screen, every room, every heart. He said, "Don't wait for leaders to be perfect. Hold them accountable. But don't stop hoping. Don't stop building." Traoré let the silence settle. Then came the twist. He ended the video by saying, "If anyone deserves to carry forward the fire, it is the one who never bowed to power. It is you, Ibrahim." The studio gasped. Traoré looked down. "I didn't ask for this. I never wanted to be praised, but I will not ignore a dying man's wish." And then, he reached for the final envelope. The envelope was red, worn at the corners, sealed with tape. On it, in Buhari's handwriting, "Open only after I am gone." Traoré's fingers trembled slightly as he broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph, faded, folded. "It was taken in 1984, Traoré said, voice low, "before Buhari ever became president." He held it up to the cameras. It showed a young Muhammadu Buhari in a village, standing beside a child in tattered clothes, handing him a pair of shoes. That boy was Buhari's cousin. He died of a fever weeks later. Buhari swore to himself that day, no child in this land should walk barefoot again. A second document fell out, a handwritten will. But it wasn't about land or cars or money. It was about ideas. He left behind a vision, not just for Nigeria, but for Africa. Buhari wrote, "Tell them I failed at many things, but I never stopped believing we could rise. Tell them to carry on." Traoré looked at the crowd, his eyes filled with fire. "And now, we must decide. Do we cry, or do we continue?" The answer was coming, and so was the final message. Traoré folded the letter slowly. No music, no movement, only breathless silence. Then, as if summoned by memory itself, the screen behind him began playing soft archival clips. Buhari visiting hospitals, speaking at the UN, smiling in the rain, hugging children during Eid. Africa wasn't just watching, it was mourning. "This isn't the end of a leader," Traoré said. "It's the end of a generation." His voice dropped. "But what hurts most is not that Buhari is gone. It's that we waited until his death to listen to the parts of him that mattered." The anchor in the international studio openly wept now. Reporters couldn't speak. Across cities, watch parties turned into candlelight vigils. "Let this moment wake us," Traoré declared, voice now steady again. "Let this grief become fuel for schools, for hospitals, for dignity." Then he whispered the final words from Buhari's letter. "Tell them, I tried. Tell them, I loved them, even when I couldn't say it." The screen faded to black. Only one sound remained. Silence. But the emotion would echo across a generation. Traoré's final words had barely faded before the screen went dark. But something strange happened. The world paused. Airports across West Africa replayed the broadcast. Drivers in Lagos pulled over to watch. In Ouagadougou, people left cafes and knelt on sidewalks, staring at giant public screens. In Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, and Niger, children asked their parents why they were crying. "He made people feel like they mattered," one mother whispered, "even the forgotten ones." Back in the studio, the producers whispered among themselves. The control room director wiped her eyes. No one moved to cut the feed. They didn't want the moment to end. And Traoré? He stood still, shoulders firm, eyes full of both fire and something softer. "This is not about Buhari alone," he said, breaking the silence. "It's about every African leader who held back tears while signing papers, and every citizen who held back dreams because no one listened." The camera zoomed in slowly. "It's time we remember who we are and who we can be." That sentence would be quoted across every news station for days, but the most unforgettable moment was still to come. Traoré reached for one final item under the podium. It was not a document, not a flash drive, not a letter. It was a small, worn-out pair of children's shoes, dusty, torn, but carefully preserved in a transparent case. Gasps filled the studio. "These belong to a boy named Hassan," Traoré said. "A Burkinabe child. He used to walk 12 kilometers to school, every day." He paused. "Buhari and I met him once, during a West African education summit. Hassan gave Buhari a drawing. Buhari gave him these shoes." The screen showed a photo, the three of them smiling in the dust. A year later, Hassan was gone, caught in a conflict not of his making. Traoré's voice trembled now. "And that's when Buhari gave me this case. He said, 'If I die before you, show these to the world, not to shame us, but to remind us.'" He held up the shoes high, visible to every camera, every country, every mother, every leader. "This is the cost of our silence. This is the weight of forgotten promises." And just like that, millions began to weep. History was no longer just being told. It was being felt. Traoré closed the case gently and placed it on the podium. He didn't rush. He didn't blink. "Buhari made mistakes. So have I. So will we all," he said, voice steady but raw. "But if we don't learn, if we don't act, Hassan's shoes will collect more dust, and so will our future." The camera panned slowly around the studio. The journalists, the technicians, the anchor, all of them, crying. "So today I don't ask for applause," Traoré said. "I ask for reflection, for dignity, for education, for unity." He turned to face the final screen behind him. A single message appeared in white letters. Tell them we tried. Now let them continue. Monsieur Buhari Traoré looked into the lens, directly into every home. Africa, let's not forget this time. He saluted once more. The screen went black. If this story touched your heart, if you cried with us, if you believe we can do better for every child like Hassan, then don't leave without leaving something behind. Like, for the leaders who tried. Share, for the children still walking barefoot. Comment. Tell us what part broke your heart, or gave you hope. Subscribe, because these are the stories the world must never silence again. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning.